this feast is very important because it tells us about the story of the cross. And this story of the cross is told to us at least twice every year. On the 14th of September and on the third Sunday of Great Lent, every year. What is the significance of the cross? Well, the cross before Jesus was crucified on it was a sign of damnation because they crucified criminals and thieves on it. And they considered Jesus as one of those criminals or thieves because, as the gospel reading said, the Jews said that he said that he's the Son of God. So he was crucified on the cross. And being crucified on the cross, or even the process before them, is a grueling, painful process. As we read during Holy Week, he was flogged, he was spat upon, he received a wreath of thorns on his head, and his head was bleeding. So that's what, and then he carried the cross on his back to the place where he was crucified. All of that is very, very painful to a human being. And as we know, Jesus was a human being in addition to being God. But all of that pales in comparison to when he is nailed on the cross. So what does it mean to be nailed on the cross, to be crucified? A few years ago, maybe more than a few years, the Journal of the New England Journal of Medicine published an article about what it means to be crucified. And it is very gruesome. It says in that article that the person who's crucified is crucified on the cross while the cross is on the ground. Somebody stretches his arm all the way to the right, and then a square peg, not a regular nail, a square peg, which is more painful, is driven into his wrist. Then the process is done on the other side. And you can imagine when we get a splinter in our hand, in our finger, how painful it is. So you can imagine how painful it is to drive a square peg into somebody's wrist. The same thing is repeated for the feet. Then they erect the cross up, and as they do, they don't do it gently. They do it very abruptly and very jerkily. So once the person is upright, because of the pain, he slumps. But as he slumps, as his arms are up, he struggles to breathe. So he pushes himself up to take a breath. And then he slumps again. And this process repeats. And he gets weaker and weaker. He pushes himself up less frequently to take a breath. And his blood becomes thicker and thicker because there's no oxygen in the blood. And as he pushes himself up and lets himself down, his back scrubs on the timber of the cross. And that timber of the cross is not polished. It's full of splinters. that go into his back. At the end, as the gospel reading said to us, that it was the day of preparation and they wanted them to die so they're not on the cross the next day. So what did they do? They broke the legs of the two thieves, and when they came to Jesus, they found out that he was already dead. So why did they break legs? Has anyone of us seen someone with a broken leg die? Why did they break their legs? Those people who are crucified, they don't die of pain because they're crucified. They die because they can't breathe anymore. And how can they not breathe anymore if they cannot push themselves up to breathe? And that's why they break their legs, so that it is excruciating to push themselves up and down. So they die of no oxygen. That's what causes them to die. And that's why the gospel reading said today that they broke their legs. It is a gruesome process for somebody to die, and for those who see that person die on the cross, as the Virgin Mary saw her son on the cross die. From that point on, the cross became a sign of hope, a sign of salvation for all of us. And that's why we celebrate the cross today. But why today? As we read in the Exaltation, there were two events that led to celebrating the cross today. The first one was the recovery of the cross, as the Persians plundered the cross and took it with them when they invaded the Roman Empire. And the second time, the second event is the finding of the cross when St. Helen found the cross in Jerusalem, as she was sent by her son, the Emperor Constantine, from Constantinople all the way down to Jerusalem. Yesterday, I gave the faithful at St. Catherine Church a brief description of why, of how it was communicated by St. Helen to her son, the Emperor, that she found the cross. Obviously, back then there was no texting, there was no email, there was no telegraph, and it would take days for a runner to get on a horse from Jerusalem all the way up to Constantinople. But St. Helen devised a plan on her way down from Constantinople to Jerusalem. She set some people on top of all the mountains, all the way down from Constantinople to Jerusalem. And she set them on the top of the mountains to communicate faster. So once she found the cross, she lit a bonfire. And the closest mountain to Jerusalem saw the fire, so the people lit a fire. Then the next mountain saw the fire, they lit a fire. So within an hour, the news was all the way up to Constantinople. And the emperor knew that his mother found the cross. And this type of bonfire is celebrated until today in the Middle East. Every 14th of July, they gather wood and they light a bonfire in celebration of the Feast of the Cross. May the cross be an inspiration to all of us, and may it be our salvation, a tool of our salvation through Christ Himself.